All right, so are you ready to get deep? Today we're taking a look at The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And wow, this book, it just has this way of making you really think you know.
It does, and it
Yes.
sticks with you, even
Yeah.
if you've just read it that one time.
And we've got some excerpts here right from the book. And I have to say, even just like revisiting these passages, it's giving me that aha feeling all over again.
Yeah, it's one of those books you can always go back to.
It's funny though, because on the surface, the idea of just like being present sounds so simple, right?
Right.
But Tolle, he really unpacks all these layers.
Yeah.
Starting with this idea that we're not like actually our thoughts, that all that chatter that's going on in our heads, that's not really us.
Right.
He calls it the egoic mind. And I'm just curious, for you, do you remember how that idea, like when you first read it, how did that strike you?
Well, I think for a lot of people, it's almost like a revelation because, we just get so used to being, caught up in that dialogue that's going on in our mind.
Yeah.
We kind of start to believe that those thoughts actually define who we are.
Right.
And I think Tolle's story, his own like personal story, especially his moment of awakening,
Yeah.
it really drives that point home.
Absolutely. He talks about this moment. It was actually like a dark moment for him where he had this thought that was like, I cannot live with myself any longer.
Yeah.
And this thought just kept repeating in his mind
Yeah.
over and over. But then he like had this realization where he's like, wait a minute, if I can't live with myself,
Right.
doesn't that mean there's two of me?
Yeah.
Like there's me and then there's the self that I can't live with.
Yeah.
And that was like this huge turning point for him. It's almost like he realized, hey, I'm not actually the car.
Right.
I'm the one driving it.
Yes.
And, and that's where this whole idea of the mind being a tool comes in. It's
Wow.
like any tool,
Right.
It can be so useful if you know how to use it. But if you just let it, run wild, it can be like this, runaway train, just totally exhausting you and just keeping you stuck in these cycles of negative thinking.
That's a great analogy.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like having this really powerful computer, but you're letting it run all these like useless programs in the background.
Right.
And so it just drains all the processing power.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no wonder that we feel so mentally exhausted sometimes.
And then on top of that, Tolle argues that so much of our suffering comes from this resistance that we have to being present to what's actually happening right now. We're always dwelling on the past or worrying about the future, and we just completely miss out on the only reality that we actually have.
This is where this idea of the pain body,
Yeah.
that really grabbed me.
Yeah.
Because it's not just some theoretical concept. It's something that I think so many of us, we really can relate to
Right.
on a personal level.
Yeah. It's that shadow self.
It's like this shadow inside of us, and it just feeds off of negativity.
Right.
Always searching for those situations that are going to feed its pain. It's almost like, it's like this creature.
A creature that needs to be fed. Yeah.
And needs to be fed.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. Tolle actually gives us this really concrete way to work with this pain body.
Right.
And it's not about like suppressing it or pretending that it's not there.
Right.
It's about like becoming conscious of it.
Becoming aware of it.
Being aware of it, exactly.
Yeah.
And he argues that just by like observing it without identifying with it,
Right.
that can actually start to dissolve its power over us. It's like shining a light, like, into this dark corner.
Yeah.
And then suddenly all the shadows, they just lose their grip.
They lose their power. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So becoming more conscious of the present moment, of the now,
Yeah.
it's like crucial. But for someone who's like, really wrestling with this pain body, or they're just constantly caught up in that mental chatter,
Right.
how do they actually like start to cultivate that awareness? I mean, it's like telling someone who's lost in the woods, just find your way out. You know, they need a compass, they need some direction.
Right.
So like, what are some of the tools
Right.
that Tolle offers?
Well, one of the things he suggests is becoming aware of our inner body.
Okay.
So shifting our attention from the constant stream of thoughts to the actual physical sensations of being alive, like noticing your breath or the feeling of your feet on the ground or just that subtle energy that's flowing through your body.
It's almost like we're reconnecting with that like physical part of ourselves.
Yeah, grounding ourselves in the present moment through our senses.
Yeah.
Through our senses.
And that can be really powerful, breaking free from that loop that's going on in our minds.
It's like hitting the pause button on that movie that's constantly playing in your head
Right.
and remembering that you're not just the viewer,
Yeah.
you're also the screen.
Oh, that's such a great analogy.
Yeah.
So tuning into our physical sensations, that's one tool. Are there others that Tully suggests for accessing this, like deeper state of awareness?
Well, he also talks about becoming aware of space.
Space.
Yeah. When we observe our surroundings, like without mentally labeling everything, just noticing the empty space that's around objects, something really interesting happens.
It's like our minds get to take a break for a second.
Yeah.
And we get this glimpse of stillness.
Yeah, exactly. And that same stillness
Yeah.
is also accessible through practices like meditation.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he even talks about this concept. I might sound a little intimidating at first.
Okay.
It's called conscious death.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
hold on. Before everyone starts to panic thinking we're about to get like super morbid here.
Right.
What does he actually mean by that?
So he's not actually suggesting that we need to, physically die to experience the now.
Okay.
But he does point out that, like, at the moment of death, very often, there's this letting go of the mind, almost emerging with pure consciousness. It's like the ultimate portal
Wow.
to the unmanifested.
The unmanifested.
Yeah, that realm of pure being that
Yeah.
exists beyond our thoughts and our perceptions.
So it's almost like by practicing presence now, we're preparing ourselves for that ultimate transition,
Yeah.
Like becoming familiar with that state of pure awareness.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not just about preparing for death. It's about enriching our lives right now.
Right.
By cultivating these moments of presence, these glimpses of the unmanifested, we start to infuse our everyday experiences with this much deeper sense of meaning and purpose.
Wow. I like that.
Yeah.
Infusing it with a deeper sense of meaning and purpose.
Yes.
Okay. So that's really interesting. I mean, it's
Yeah.
amazing how
It's a lot to take in, isn't it?
it is. It is.
Yeah.
It's interesting, how Tolle brings this idea of the unmanifested, that realm of pure being, how he connects it to the idea of surrender. And that's actually something that kind of tripped me up at first,
Right.
because I think a lot of people, when they hear the word surrender, they think of weakness or giving up,
Right.
like passivity.
It definitely goes against how we're usually conditioned. Right?
Yeah, totally.
To always be striving and fighting,
Yeah.
trying to control everything.
Right. Like you have to be in control.
But, Tolle is very clear that surrender, it's not about becoming like a doormat or abandoning your responsibilities. It's more about aligning yourself with a deeper intelligence, like letting go of the ego's grip on the steering wheel.
Okay, and can you remind me again how he defines ego?
Sure.
Because it's one of those words that can mean a lot of different things to different people.
Right. He's not just talking about being arrogant or self-centered. For him, the ego is this false sense of self that we create in our minds based on our thoughts and emotions and, external circumstances. It's like trying to build a house on sand.
It's not going to last very long.
Exactly. It's inherently unstable.
So we're basically basing our whole identity on things that are constantly changing.
Right.
I mean, no wonder we always have this sense of unease.
Yeah.
Never feeling totally complete.
Exactly. And that's why the ego is always seeking that validation, always trying to protect itself.
Right.
Which just leads to this constant fear and dissatisfaction. It's that feeling of never being enough or never having enough.
Never enough.
But surrender offers us a way out of that trap.
Okay.
It's about recognizing the limits of this ego-driven identity and connecting with something deeper, a more authentic sense of self.
A self that's rooted in being, in the present moment. So it's almost like we're trading in this really fragile, limited identity for something much more expansive and stable.
That's a beautiful way to put it, yeah.
So how do we even begin to approach this idea of surrender practically? Let's say you're someone who's really struggling in some area of their life. Maybe it's a relationship or a job they hate.
Right.
Is surrender about just accepting those circumstances and not trying to change them?
It's not about blind acceptance or resigning yourself to a miserable situation.
Okay.
It's more about shifting your perspective, changing your internal relationship to the situation.
Okay.
It's about asking yourself, what can I control in this moment?
Right.
What actions can I take that are aligned with my values, with my sense of purpose?
So it's not about being passive. It's about choosing our actions consciously
Yes.
from a place of presence,
Yes.
rather than just like reacting to whatever's happening around us. It's like the difference between forcing a door open and
Right.
finding the key that unlocks it effortlessly.
I love that analogy.
And, it's remarkable how Tolle connects surrender to the way we experience those challenges and even suffering.
Yeah.
He doesn't shy away from the reality that life can be tough,
No.
that we're all going to face pain and loss and disappointment.
It's inevitable.
It's inevitable, exactly.
Yeah.
But he's offering like a different way of relating to those experiences.
Yes.
So instead of, resisting them or pushing them away, pretending they're not happening, he's basically saying like, lean in.
Yeah. Embrace them.
Embrace them.
Feel them fully.
He encourages us to really feel those difficult emotions.
Yes.
To let them flow through us without judgment, without resistance.
Because it's in that space of surrender,
Yeah.
in that willingness to face what is, that's where the real transformation happens.
It's like those wildflowers that,
Right.
bloom in the cracks of a sidewalk.
Yes.
They don't resist the harshness, they embrace it.
They embrace it and they blossom
And they blossom.
in spite of it.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions about surrender is that it means giving up on hope.
Mm.
But what I'm hearing is that it's actually about opening up to a different kind of hope.
Yeah.
A hope that's not dependent on things outside of us,
Right.
but on our own inner strength, our resilience.
That's a really good point.
And I think that's where compassion comes in.
Yes.
Not just compassion for other people who are struggling,
Right.
but compassion for ourselves.
Yes, because we're all works in progress.
Totally.
We're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to stumble and fall. We're going to experience pain and disappointment.
So instead of beating ourselves up
Right.
or getting caught up in self-judgment, surrender invites us to meet those moments with kindness and understanding.
Yeah. It's like saying to yourself, hey, I'm doing the best that I can with what I have, and that's enough.
Yeah.
And it's in that space of self-compassion that the real healing and growth can occur.
Mm.
We stop fighting ourselves. We stop resisting life.
We stop resisting.
And we open ourselves up to the possibility of something new emerging, something more aligned with our true nature, with our deeper purpose.
And I think that's what's so powerful about Tolle's teachings. He's not just offering us a set of beliefs or,
Right.
Some rigid dogma.
Right.
He's inviting us to explore these ideas,
To experiment.
to see what resonates with our own experience.
Exactly. It's like he's giving us a set of tools,
Mm-hmm.
a map.
A map.
But you're the one who has to walk the path.
You're the one who has to walk the path. Yeah.
You're the one who gets to discover what the power of now means for you.
And that's a journey I'm definitely willing to keep taking. But before we dive into the next part of our exploration, I'm just curious, what's resonating with you the most so far?
Yeah, what about this idea of surrender?
Mm-hmm.
Letting go of the ego, connecting with a deeper sense of self. What insights are sparking your curiosity? We'll delve deeper into Tolle's teachings in the next part, but for now, take a moment to reflect on what you've heard and see what wisdom emerges for you.
One of the things that's really striking me as we've been going through the power of now is how Tolle, he's able to weave together all these ancient spiritual teachings with a modern understanding of psychology,
Yeah,
even physics.
he really does. It's like he bridges this gap
Yeah.
between esoteric wisdom and, practical everyday living.
Yeah.
It's not about, going off and living in a cave somewhere and detaching from the world.
Right.
It's about bringing that awareness, that presence into everything that we do.
So it's not about escaping from the world. It's more about changing how we experience it.
Exactly. Yeah. And Tolle even suggests that this shift in consciousness, it can actually lead us to engage with the world in a more joyful way, even a more creative way.
Mm.
When we're present, we're so much more attuned to our senses, we can appreciate beauty more.
Right.
We're more in tune with our intuition and our creativity.
It's almost like we're waking up to all this richness that was always there, but we were just too caught up in our heads to even notice it.
Yeah, exactly.
And speaking of things we might be overlooking, one of the recurring themes in the book that I keep coming back to is, Tolle's emphasis on joy.
Yeah, he uses it almost like a barometer for presence, doesn't he?
Yeah.
It's like, if what you're doing isn't bringing you joy, it's a sign that you're resisting life.
Right.
You're not fully present.
It's such a simple idea, but it's so powerful. It makes me think about all the times we do things because we think we should be doing them.
Yeah.
Or we're trying to live up to someone else's expectations.
Right.
And we just completely lose sight of what actually brings us joy.
And that's where we get stuck, when we're operating from this sense of obligation or fear rather than inspiration and joy.
Exactly. And what I really appreciate about Tolle's approach is that he doesn't sugarcoat things. You
Right.
know, he acknowledges that sometimes following our joy means we have to make these difficult
Right,
choices.
like saying no
Yeah.
to things we've always done, maybe relationships that aren't serving us anymore,
Mhm.
or even careers that seem promising but have become soul-crushing.
It's scary,
Yeah, it can be really scary.
especially when it means like challenging the status quo
Yeah,
or maybe even disappointing people that we care about.
right, because it can feel like we're letting go of a part of ourselves,
Totally.
like a part of our identity.
It can feel like shedding a skin. Right.
Yeah, it can. It's like stepping into the
You're
unknown.
stepping into the unknown.
But Tolle reminds us that even though it's challenging, this process can also be incredibly liberating.
Yeah.
It's about creating space for something new,
Mm.
something that's more aligned with who we really are.
It's like clearing out the clutter in our lives, both internally and externally,
Yeah,
so we can make room for what really matters.
Yeah.
And for Tolle, what matters most is that connection to the present moment,
right.
that awareness of our own being.
It's about recognizing that the freedom that we seek, that peace, that wholeness,
Yeah.
it's not something we need to achieve or earn. It's already here
It's already here.
within us
Yeah.
if we can just quiet our minds enough to experience it.
It's not about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who we truly are.
Yeah.
You know, beyond the limits of our thoughts and our ego.
It's like coming home to ourselves,
Yeah.
to the present moment. And I think that's really the ultimate invitation of the power of now.
Beautifully said. Well, as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious, what are your final reflections? Like, if you could pick one area of your life to approach with this radical acceptance that Tolle talks about,
Yeah.
what would it be?
What do you think might shift within you if you could fully embrace this present moment with all of its joys and challenges? We invite you to keep exploring, to keep diving deeper into the wisdom of this book,
Right.
and to share your insights and what you discover along the way.
Thanks for joining us on this journey, and until next time, keep diving deep.